Okay, what we're going to be learning about today is forms of government. Just to start off, the Republic is our type of government. And in Rome, when Republic was first formed, it is government of the people. It often has representatives today. That's Rome. These two, direct democracy and republic, and representative democracy, are the two types of democracies that have influenced the United States. The direct democracy is people have a direct voice in government. Examples, ancient Athens or your local government. You can see an image of this right here where the people are having a direct voice in government. What that looks like is whenever we take a class vote or whenever you're in a town hall meeting. All those things are direct democracy. Representative democracy, that is individuals have a voice in government through representatives. Whenever we elect someone to represent us in Washington or Tallahassee, that is representative democracy. We kind of call that republic today, but how this works is that the individual will vote on a person, that person ends up representing us in Congress, and they end up creating laws for us. Example of that is in Rome and in the United States. A positive for direct democracy is that your individual voice will always be heard. A negative, though, is that it is not efficient for large countries, and the interest of the individual might trump the individual of the common good. Another positive of this is this works great with smaller communities. Representative democracy. The positive of this is that it's a very efficient form of government. People feel like their voice is heard. But the drawback is that the people in power have to set aside their individual aspirations and do what's good for the common good. An example of this, here it is right here. You have the visual of the government. And those who are part of the government are those who were sent by the people. I have color-coded this because this represents the different ideas and beliefs of the people. And people of like mind and beliefs are going to vote in people who share those same ideas. Hence why we have parties. Republicans, Democrats. Okay, the next form of government is communism, as shown in today's terms by China, Soviet Union, Vietnam, and Cuba. Government is going to own all the productions in this model. There's no private property, and the goal is equality. Unfortunately, what often happens is everyone's equal, but as someone has said, they're equally miserable. And this often becomes corrupt. It removes all the rights of the people, because the idea, as Karl Marx laid it out, is that the government will take all private property and then it's going to give it back to the people and disband itself. But he never really specifies how the people are going to take control of the government. And so what typically happens is the government just becomes this powerful government that steps on the rights of the people. You cannot criticize that government. Normally there's this head person that's in charge of the government, and normally it's one person in charge or one party. Sometimes there's a select few. But I've drawn it here with the circle right here representing the government. This circle right here is the government controlling all means of production. These black specks are factories and houses. And those pink dots are the government. It's the party officials. Sometimes you have that party leader like Joseph Stalin, Lenin, Mao. All of them were the party leaders who kind of were the figure, the head of that communist party. And it was all based off of social class. You had to be a good communism, otherwise you'd get sent away or put in a camp. And here are all the people, and this little face right here is a face with a zipper over it, signifying that they have very little rights. The next form of government is monarchy. And under a monarchy, it's a king or queen, emperor or empress, and powers pass through heirs, which means that whoever their son or daughter is, usually they become king or queen. And there's two types. Absolute, which is the king has all or unlimited power. For example, in Saudi Arabia, it's almost autocracy, but because it's a king or queen, it's going to be a monarchy. And the second one is constitutional, where there's a democratic government, a parliament, that limits the king's powers. For example, the Magna Carta with King John established that with Great Britain in the United Kingdom. King John had to have these advisors that eventually became what we call Parliament. And here's an example of that. You have the king, represented with that little orange crown, and his government, and sometimes, and I drew this smaller circle, they have a parliament. That's how it would be the constitutional, with the pink figures being the parliament. And then you have the people, the green dots, who have to serve him. Our third board shows us oligarchy. Oligarchy is the rule of the few. It controls exercised by a small group of people, either through wealth or power. Often the power is exercised secretly, not open. They don't like to be open about it. And it's what I call, and many others call, the power behind the throne. So you may have this puppet leader, but the real power is behind him. So the puppet leader will do whatever the powerful few want him or her to do. And here's an example of that. You have the pink dots. The circle around it is the government, and the people are just on the outside. An example of this was in South Africa in the 1990s under the apartheid regime. The apartheid regime was favoring whites over black Africans. The Africans were kind of segregated out. That ended around the mid-1990s with Nelson Mandela and that movement. It took a long time, but it's been removed. Autocracy is the government where a single ruler takes power. Sometimes they're popular, but then they usually show their true colors. Sometimes they take power by force. They have unlimited power, and they'll deny people's fundamental rights. Examples of this are Nazi Germany with Hitler, Italy with Mussolini, and Iraq with Saddam Hussein. And here's the image of the government, signified by one person, and all the little green dots signifying the people under this person. Normally, when this person passes or steps down, that government goes with it. And some communist regimes, for example, when Stalin was in power, could be signified as autocracy. But there's differences between the two because communism, it's the way the government was set up and it had that party. So that's autocracy. We now move on to the last two systems. Anarchy, which has no government. It's characterized by chaos. Your rights are always being taken and they're always in jeopardy. And the state of nature. It is what the founding fathers and those who influence them consider state of nature. And your natural rights are in danger. Socialism is the economic and a political theory. We'll get more into that in economics as well, where the government seeks and encourages that it will own the means of production, and it seeks to administer the means of production. That cross-out one is production. There is no free market and there's no private business. Some of the benefits is that those that may not be able to afford health care, maybe they can afford it now. But the downside is, though, that the quality usually is not what they could get in a free market. It's a very costly system. It could be very inefficient because we're talking about large government here. And it can have the tendency of sliding into communism. Just if it slides a certain way, after a decade or so, it could become that. But the difference is that there are some private businesses, there are different political parties. It's just that the government's more involved. But as Margaret Thatcher once said, the problem with socialism is that eventually you run out of someone else's money. But that's their quote. That's their bias. So there are some that espouse it, but it's kind of an economic and quasi-political theory. So that's what we have today. Direct democracy, people directly vote in their government. Representative democracy, the individuals vote on people to represent them in their government. Communism, where the government takes everything and seeks to give it to the people. It's where the government owns everything, and there's no private property and rights are usually stepped on. You have monarchy, where you have a king or queen. It could be all-powerful or limited by a constitution. You have oligarchy, rule of the few. You have autocracy, rule of one. You have the anarchy, where there is no government, it's chaos. Socialism, where the government is controlling large sectors of the economy, but it's not quite communist yet. Those are form of governments. We're going to look more in depth with these today. I'll see you guys next time.